everyone, I'm Carlota Pico from the Content Mix, and I'm excited to be here today with Galya Korukhchyan, who is Global Brand Manager at Malibu, which is part of the Absolut Company, which is also part of the Pernod Ricard group. And apart from that, she also has 7 years of experience in marketing and communications. Wow, what an introduction, Galya. Oh, thank you so much for joining us on the Content Mix.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for reaching out to me.
I can't wait to hear more about the structure. Everything is part of everything. But before we get to that, tell me a little bit about your background. How did you get to this role, and why did you decide to start a career in marketing?
Sure. So yes, my name is Galya. I'm originally born in Armenia, but raised in Russia. And then I moved for studies in Sweden, and this is where I'm located. By background or by education, I finished business education and business school. However, I quickly got to know that marketing is really something where I feel most passionate about. So I started actually as an intern in the digital communications team in the Absolut Company, working for Absolut. And it's actually fun experience how I got to be an intern. I was in my last year master's, and a friend of mine called me on Saturday, hey, do you want to be part of this fun business challenge created by Pernod Ricard? And guess what? If you get to win the international finals, you could be interviewed for Pernod Ricard. I was like, okay, yeah, fun, sure, why not? And then she was like, but the challenge is that the deadline is on Monday. I was like, okay. So anyhow, long story short, we got to win the international finals for that business challenge. And it was really one of my highlights of my I would say 20s, because then I got to be interviewed for the Absolut Company. And back then it was when I was 23. Back then, digital was really booming, and all the social media and the influencer marketing, et cetera. So I really wanted to work in that area. So I got the interview in the Absolut Company, started working for Absolut, and then it was a year for my internship. And then I was offered to stay within the company to work as a junior brand manager for another brand, which I accepted because I love the company. It's such a fun... we have something called convivialité. It's one of our Pernod Ricard values, so I really enjoy it. I got to stay, but quickly I really realized that digital specifically maybe is not something I would like to be expert in. I'm more interested in brand communication, strategic marketing. So I got to, asking the right projects within that field. I quickly moved into overall communications. Basically now I'm brand manager for Malibu, as you said, working in communications.
Okay, so exciting. Well, I definitely want to ask you about that project that led you into your Pernod Ricard career. What was it? What made it so special?
It was called Spirits of Entrepreneurs, and the challenge, it was basically, how would students get a case study and you would work on a challenge, on a task, just like as an agency, you would present back several sessions back and forth. You have a specific budget, you have a specific brief, everything what we do in marketing. And the project was, we were supposed to create a digital innovation for Absolut. And Absolut Vodka, it's such an iconic brand, and being a student, you're like, oh my God, you remember all the advertising that Absolut did. And you have all this in your head, and you're like, okay, what can you really create? No, it was really great.
Sounds very exciting. Definitely would have been one of the highlights of my 20s as well. Galya, I do want to ask you. So it seems like Pernod Ricard has lots of layers underneath it, and it's kind of like a spider web. Would you be able to break down the structure for us a little bit, just so that we understand how Malibu works?
Absolutely. So I won't bore you with all the details, but on a sort of top line level, Pernod Ricard owns a number of brands, just like I said, Absolut, Malibu, Perrier Jouet, one of the champagne brands. So Pernod Ricard is a decentralized organization. We have local markets and we have brand owners. Brand owners own brand strategies. So the Absolut Company is a brand owner for Absolut Vodka, for Malibu Kahlua, whereas market companies are responsible primarily for distribution of those products, but also local marketing efforts. So hence, say, for instance, we have Pernod Ricard in Spain, who is responsible for local marketing efforts for Malibu, for instance, as well as sales for Malibu. Does that answer your question?
It does answer my question. Thank you. So my next question is going to be COVID-19 related. The word that none of us like. So COVID-19 has obviously impacted industries across all fields and worldwide, unfortunately. Could you walk us through best branding and storytelling practices, tips, and insights for the beverage industry during these very unstable times?
Let me try. So I think I could begin saying that it's been insanely challenging to work during COVID-19, especially if you are in the marketing and especially if you are in communications and you are about to launch a campaign, which we are in Malibu, to be honest. So you face so many changes on an everyday basis, sometimes on an hourly basis. And at some point, you don't even think about COVID-19 from personal point of view, but more from like work point of view. Mm-hmm. So I think on a general note, like when we entered COVID-19, I think in Europe and in the US, it was beginning of March or something around that, whereas in Asia, it was earlier, obviously. So you could have noticed a lot of brands went with a slightly general message of, in the beginning, it was fine, but later on it became general. We care about you, something along the lines of we care about you. It's really hard times. We're here for you. But then, a couple of weeks after, it became too general. It became almost too vanilla. So if anyone is interested, you can go and Google vanilla COVID-19 marketing, and you'll see like a compilation on YouTube with several different brands carrying across the same message, but in a different way, really not resonating. For me, the one that stood out most, let me think, which one was that? I think maybe Nike stood out quite a bit. I really liked it, not in the beverage though. In the beverage, industry, it was really very hard because the message that we try to carry across is really about enjoying the drink together when it comes from a functional point of view. And then you can't be together, obviously. Yeah. So you have to quickly turn around because consumers' emotional state of mind is completely different. They are some people, lose their friends, family members. So you cannot, your communication cannot be tone deaf.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. It must be really difficult also to work in the alcohol industry because during COVID-19, I mean, it's a very thin line in terms of being able to market those products already without COVID-19. But then you add the extra layer of COVID-19 challenges, and it's like, how am I supposed to talk about this product without really being misinterpreted?
Exactly. I think the trick is really, we're talking about, we have functional communication, we have emotional communication, right? But no matter what type of communication you go for, you still cannot be tone deaf because your consumer is ultimately deciding then in the end. What I've seen though, or what we've seen as an industry, I believe, maybe I can't speak for the whole industry, but as a company is that e-commerce sales just, they went to the roof. It was like, if you're not prepared to sell on e-commerce, I guess you lost that battle.
No, definitely. But it was also a really important time to resonate with your audience, as you said. So you faced a challenge that normally under normal situation or in circumstances, you would invite them to share a drink together. But under current situation, you can't invite people to share a drink together because most of the world was on lockdown. Yes, so it's not like they were able to just go over to each other's house and cheers.
Yeah.
And one, it
Exactly.
wasn't the time to be cheering, and two, it wasn't the time to be meeting up either. So how
Yeah.
did you get around those obstacles? What did you do from a communication point of view?
Yeah. So a little bit sort of like history to that. We were we have a brand campaign called Malibu Games, and that's our yearly campaign and celebration of summer fun because Malibu, it celebrates the spirit of summer. So we were in March when COVID-19 hit us. We were supposed to go to Dominican Republic where we were shooting our brand campaign. And the shooting is, in a nutshell, it's a live event with, I would think, with around over 30 influencers from different countries like US, UK, Korea, etc., etc. They would be playing games so that they enjoy the summer fun, and then we would be shooting and then distributing that content. But since it was COVID-19, obviously we couldn't travel. So the question comes then from a brand point of view and from all the launching markets for that campaign, what do you do? Because summer is not canceled. Yes, there is COVID-19, but summer for our consumers is not canceled. And for our brand, it's one of the most important time periods, so to speak. So then you kind of pause and you think, and what do you do? So our strategy was really I think we went dark on all social media channels for around 2 weeks or something. And that was time for us to really think about, okay, what do we do so that we are empathetic towards our consumers. We came out with a short-term strategy, which was basically bringing a little bit of sunshine to people around the world at this point of time, because we believe that a little bit of sunshine is all you need because you are under lockdown, pretty much. Then we quickly launched that campaign across the world with all our markets. And then we moved into, at the same time, for our summer hero campaign, so to speak, which we are to launch next week. Fingers crossed. And it's going to be super fun, super fun.
I think it's a secret still, right? You're not able to.
Yes, and I cannot say. Yeah, exactly. I hope when the interview goes live, it will be already live. But unfortunately, I can't tell much. But it's gone through. I think to answer your question, what we have done, we have actually done several consumer tests with consumers in the US specifically, where we've shared the concept and iterated just to sense check how people feel about this, because we, at this period of time, we think we have to deal with, or we need to think about people's feelings, and it's really hard because it's not normal.
Mm-hmm. Well, Galya, if you ever need more consumers to test out your product, count on me. I'll also take you up on that Dominican Republic experience. I'm not an influencer, but I'm more than happy to participate in any of your branding initiatives.
Oh my God, yes. We keep in touch.
Okay. So let's move into best brand practices. So when it comes to content, HubSpot CEO said the following, quote, "What separates good content from great content is a willingness to take risks and to push the envelope," end quote. Because of your extensive branding experience, what do you think separates good branding from great branding?
I actually agree with that saying very, very much. I think what really separates good from great is the readiness to create the tension in consumers' minds. And when I say the tension, I mean, it's communication piece would resonate if it creates some sort of a feeling, some sort of an emotion. If it does not do that, then it's just average. Mm-hmm. If it does not, if you don't see something and you're like, it made me feel happy. So if you don't feel a certain feeling, then I think it didn't get the point through. Mm-hmm. It's a fine balance, I think, where you kind of understand what your consumption pool would need, but you cannot go after it because it's very sort of, I don't want to call it average. It's something that everyone would understand, but you want to resonate with those who would pick this up as innovators and then would bring it down to the consumptible.
Galya, you make this seem so easy. Like branding is fake. But from personal experience, I know it's not. So what advice would you give to people that are struggling to create powerful brands, especially entrepreneurs that are just at the beginning phases of defining who their brand is? How do they know who their brand is? How do they know who their brand is going to resonate with?
Oh my God, that's a very hard question. It's like, I don't know, to be honest.
That's why I'm asking the question. I don't either.
I think if you think about this, it's really readiness to take the risk, I would think. And as I said, it's really fine balance between coming across as too risky and coming across as a bit of risky, but still people would resonate with you. When it comes to branding or really something that would resonate with people, I think you shouldn't create anything that people wouldn't that there is no need for that, if you know what I mean. So you really need to find what your consumer needs are, what your consumer state of mind is, what do they feel like, what do they want. Ultimately, everything comes down to your consumer. It's if you don't find the way to be friends with them, you won't really move the needle.
So I guess you're referring to personas as well, right? Like really defining consumers according to different personas, and then thinking about what that persona wants and how you would communicate and relate to that persona.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what you are touching upon is really extremely important. So the way, it's not a rocket science, right? You wouldn't work with from a consumer insights point of view. You don't only have this psychological. You would go after psychological metrics. So it's not only about demographics, as in okay, here's the age bracket, here is, I don't know, the average spend, etc., but you would go after just on top of my head, what are the movies that this specific target is interested in? What are the beliefs that these people have? What are the values that these people have? What are the brands that they resonate with? And then you sort of build this bubbles in a way. Then upon that, you build your targeting strategy, obviously, your PR strategy, your comm strategy, everything. Yeah.
Okay. That makes complete sense. Okay. Now moving into product launches in Europe, because from my research, I know you're quite an expert on this. When it comes to the EMEA region, what regional nuances, challenges, or opportunities should marketers keep in mind?
Well, I would say, I can only speak for the alcohol brands.
Obviously.
So I think in general, we have a lot of sort of regulations and rules that we need to follow. And every market is very specific from, legal drinking age or, how old you should be. Legal drinking age, etc. So, there's no, so to speak, one rule for every market, because within Europe, even you have markets where we actually technically cannot do advertising. We call those markets dark markets, like for instance in Sweden, above the line advertising, it's pretty much non-existent. In France is a dark market as well, so it's very hard to communicate anything in France. You have to be ultra careful. And for instance, we've been launching, when I was working on Absolut, my last project on Absolut was to launch a limited edition across, I think it was around 70, 80 markets. So pretty much you have to find your groups of markets. And then, for instance, in France specifically, you cannot portray on your main visual or on your hero piece of assets anything that hasn't been used to produce the product, which is obviously extremely hard. The creativity level that you have to, or your agencies have to work with, it's very tricky.
Okay, so how do you get around that? How do you market a product that can't be marketed?
It's hard, to be honest, because ultimately, for working for such brand as Absolut, where creativity is really very high on an agenda, because it is a creative brand, you have to find different ways. It's working directly and super tight collaboration with local markets to find if something is going to work. But it's also ultimately, trying to prioritize, because I think no matter where you work, either if it's in marketing or in any other industry, you have to have critical thinking as to, okay, what are my priorities and what are the priorities from business point of view as well.
Okay. Sounds like very hard, because to be creative when you're not really allowed to promote a product, I mean, I wouldn't know how to get around that, to be honest. I wouldn't know where to start.
Yeah. I think, it's, we have, specifically if we're talking about France, we have had a super interesting campaign in France where it's extremely challenging to promote, actually, to do any marketing, where everything in the visual, that was a visual communication, in the visual was in a creative manner portraying what's being used in the production of the product. And when I say in the creative manner, I don't necessarily, you have different techniques, right? Digital techniques or photography techniques, et cetera. So agencies who have a bit of experience working with markets kind of get how to do that.
Okay. So then, just to really drive the point home, what did the final product look like? That special campaign that you were working on for Absolut, for the Absolut Company in France, what was the final product? What did the final product look like?
It was a limited edition bottle called Absolut Comeback. The creative idea was that it was a recycled bottle.
Okay.
And the creative idea was that all Absolut bottles come back in a new shape and form. So the visual portrayed pretty much broken glass, which was used in production of the product. But it was done in a not in a very, how to say, in a creative manner.
Okay.
If that answers your question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it definitely serves to inspire our listeners, because I'm sure lots of our listeners are thinking the exact same thing as I'm thinking, or that I was thinking, like, okay, well, so then how do you promote that product if you can't promote it in that market without saying its name? So by using different graphics and visuals that will basically say the same thing without saying it, I think does serve as an inspiration and a way of getting around those hurdles.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say, in communications, I really like those kind of campaigns that do not overtly communicate what they're supposed to say, but kind of create communication that imply what the viewer should think. So the more of implying is done, the better, I think, because then you let the consumer interpret in the way you want them to interpret.
Okay, so let's talk more about some of the campaigns that you've recently seen that have really just sparked your imagination, inspired you to continue your career in brand marketing. What did they promote? What were they saying? What made them stand out or so special?
Of course. So, I think the one that comes to my mind straight is, I'm not sure if you've seen, but it was a campaign who won at least several Cannes Lions, I think last year, 2019, I believe, or 2018. It was Viva la Vulva. I'm sorry. I'm not sure if you heard about it.
Okay.
It was done by a female hygiene brand portraying, it was basically a long form video ad where the female vulva was presented through different shapes and forms to communicate, female hygiene, which I believe is, back to the point of you use your creative imagination, or the agency uses the different creative ways how this could be communicated to imply what you want to say.
Okay. Right.
So that was one of them. I think There was another one which I really liked, to be honest. It was I think done in Poland, if I'm not mistaken. It was a collaboration between several brands and organizations I think it was a last issue of porn magazine. Now I remember, it was the last issue of a porn magazine. So they bought out the magazine. They called it the last issue, and they used all the females that were opinion leaders in the country, and they completely shifted from a porn magazine towards this high quality magazine with females on the cover through the different interviews, etc., etc.
Oh, I love that. I love that last example.
Cool, right?
So
Super
creative.
Cool. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. My last interview of this section will be, what would you have loved to have known 7 years ago when you started off in marketing? So what major lessons have you learned since then? What advice would you love to give to aspiring marketing professionals who want to follow in your footsteps?
That's a very good question. I think two things maybe. One of them is don't be afraid of making mistakes, because mistake is ultimately a learning. It's an experience. It's just a matter of your attitude, how you approach the mistake. You could, think about a mistake as if you failed, but you could also think of a mistake as a learning. So you just take that on board and quickly move ahead with that learning. I think the second one would be to trust your gut feeling. And this one is very hard because, it has to do with your confidence, right? So, and the gut feeling is not really, if you're in the beginning of your career, the gut feeling isn't really experienced enough, so to speak. So you have to really sort of consume a lot of publications, media, read books, talk to people within your industry, get inspired, ask to be challenged. So by doing that, you kind of train your gut feeling. And then when, a decision comes, when it's really hard, you first of all, you are used to actually asking, being challenged by your colleagues, by your team members, by someone outside of the company even. And then you also listen to your gut feeling, your intuition ultimately.
Okay. So keep on hustling, just keep on pushing the envelope, and always listen to your first instinct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very valuable. Now we are going to be moving into our set of rapid fire questions, which are your recommendations to our audience. You've already inspired us so much, so I can't wait to hear who inspired you. Who do you admire? Why do you admire that person? Is it an influencer? Is it a professional role model? Please go ahead.
I don't think I'll be. I hope my answer is inspiring. That's my sister. Nothing. It's a family member, a very close person to me. She's a role model to me.
What makes her a role model?
The person who's never afraid of speaking out her mind.
Okay, beautiful. What about a book, a publication, or an event that you would like to recommend?
I think I'm reading right now the book called Principles by Ray Dalio. I don't know if you heard about it. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily in the marketing and communications, but it's very definitely a really good book to read if you want to kind of amp up your critical thinking and become a better person no matter your industry.
Okay, excellent. And last but not least, what's your favorite app at the moment during Corona times?
Instagram. Nothing very different, I guess, from the rest.
What makes Instagram so special right now?
Pictures. You can travel, and traveling is something that I love. So hence you just travel around the world through your Instagram.
Okay, excellent. Galya, thank you so much for joining us on the Content Mix. It was a pleasure to meet you and also to learn about your experience.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
The pleasure was ours. And to everyone listening in today, thank you for joining us on The Content Mix. For more perspectives on the content marketing industry in Europe, check out The Content Mix. We'll be releasing interviews just like this one every week, so keep on tuning in. Thanks again. See you next time and have a fabulous day. Bye.
Bye.